Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for joining us today. Last stream is gonna go up live on YouTube probably starting Monday. So that one with Seiji will be up, which ties into our one today with Dave. Because the next stream will be with Dave, Seiji, and Vlad, and talking about their project that they did, which we talked a little bit in the last one with Seiji. So without further ado, I'll switch over here and we can say what's up to Dave. What up?
Yo, what's going
Yo,
on?
thanks for joining.
You're,
Um,
you're bringing Vlad in, huh?
yeah, it'll be interesting. He was very adamant that he didn't want to be a part of it and he'll just be a silent observer, but
Yeah,
have to bring him in because he did do quite an integral part of that.
yeah.
He
No,
Vladed it up,
he
as
Vladed it up.
which
Yep.
my brain just can't comprehend that complexity or ease at which he executes on that stuff.
Oh yeah, he's
I've
he's
had
a
to try to
wizard.
do it once and I was just like, it was him doing stuff and I was the other artist and I was like, here's
Yeah,
my three ideas. And he's like, well, here's 500 that I came up with. And it was like, how? How do
yeah.
you do
He
that so quickly?
he's the fastest illustrator, the Adobe Illustrator user I've ever seen. He tried to show me one time. So like we were both in perception. I was like sitting behind him. I was like, "Yo, show me how you're doing all this." And like my eyes just glazed over because he was like, "Oh, I had to go over here to go to the Pathfinder," and I was like, "What the?" Like it was like 2 hours later, and I
There
was
were
like, "I
tools I didn't know exist. Like I tried, they needed the thing changed in one of them, and I was like, I don't even know what's happening. Like I don't know how
yeah,
this. I can't move it. I don't know where it is or how it's tied to something. But it was like cloned, and it was a pattern in a pattern that was. I was so
yeah,
lost. I was like, I don't even know how to adjust this.
yeah."
Which
So
spent
like,
me like, yeah, trying to make the same pattern would have spent me like 30 minutes and just
yeah,
a couple clicks and it's done. But enough of Vlad. This is the Dave hour.
Dave Hour.
But yeah, we can kind of start. You can introduce yourself and kind of what you do, so everyone who doesn't know can kind of know, and then we can go into a little bit of backstory.
Sure. So I'm a motion designer, mostly in 3D, like Cinema 4D, and I've been using Blender a lot more recently.
Mm-hmm.
We recently did the Unreal short. Uh, that was an interesting experience, especially with like new tools and stuff like that. But I also do 2D. We've worked together
Mm-hmm.
a little bit at Perception on some big projects. And yeah, I've been doing this since 2014. So it's been a while. And I've definitely seen, I think I've seen like almost every level of the industry, I would say. Like I started doing like stadium graphics
Mm,
and stuff right out of school. I didn't really know what motion design was
hmm.
because I studied film
Right.
and I knew After Effects though, because I had been using After Effects since high school,
Mm-hmm.
making little machinimas. Do you know
Oh yeah,
machinima?
yeah. Like video game machinimas. I think
Yeah,
that
yeah,
has to be. It has to be a video game. So
yeah.
are you like familiar with like the inventors of it, like Red versus Blue machinima, like that
Yes,
old? Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
exactly. Yes,
Awesome.
exactly. Red vs. Blue, Rooster Teeth, which now like is a huge company.
Mega
They're now.
corporation with
Oh
like
yeah.
umbrellas under. It's crazy that
Uh-huh.
like, yeah, early internet it was like before YouTube. It was like you go to their website to
Right.
watch
Yeah,
Red
yeah,
versus
yeah.
Blue. It's crazy.
You go to the Red vs. Blue or the Rooster Teeth website, and they'd have it like uploaded there first. But those, yeah, I was doing like Halo stuff with that, and I learned After Effects and Adobe
Mm.
through YouTube basically because it was like 2006, which is when I
Mm-hmm.
think YouTube started 2005 or something like that.
Yeah, I think
So at
so.
the start of YouTube, there like wasn't as much tutorials on like what to do. There
Mm-hmm.
was some, and I think what was it like Lynda.com? Do you remember
Yep.
Lynda?
Mm-hmm.
So like that
Before it was
was
like bought by, I think it's bought by LinkedIn. Like
yeah
it's
yeah
tied into it. Yeah.
yeah LinkedIn. I think it's called like LinkedIn Learning now. I
Yeah.
never use it
No.
now, but back then that was like the where you would learn. Um, so I was mostly doing it for like filmmaking and like shitty VFX stuff,
Yeah.
you know. So when I got out of school, I was like, oh shit, what do I do now with film? You know, it's like, what is that? I did like some PA gigs on some reality TV shows. Um, and then I started just like we talked about earlier, shotgunning out my resume to like, and I made a reel really quickly with a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of just random After Effects stuff, and I shot it out to all these different studios in the local Tampa area. I went to school in Florida, and I eventually got into uh, the Tampa Bay Rays, and I was doing like stadium graphics there, and that was really fun because you would stay during the games, and you had to
Mm.
like wear a headset, and you'd punch in numbers to bring up the graphics on the big stadium screen.
Okay, yeah.
It was very active, and you're like kind of like going in and stuff. So I thought that was a great internship. And that's where I got introduced to Cinema 4D. My boss Bob, who was like 26 at the time, so he's like 4 years older than me,
Mm-hmm.
still a young guy as well. And he showed me Cinema 4D, and I was like kind of like, oh, this looks really complex. Like I don't know if I can figure
Right.
this out. And he's like, don't worry about it, I'll do it. And he had like some Shatter plugin like that you could download, and we were
The
like putting,
Nitro
yes, exactly,
40. Yeah.
yeah. So I was like, okay. And then I picked it up really quick. And I was like, damn, this is way cooler. Like
Mm-hmm.
the 3D is way cooler than 2D. So I left after the internship was over, and I went to an ad agency in Virginia um, called Tier 10, and they did like vertical automotive advertising. So like every step of the chain,
Hmm.
a lot of like national spots for car dealerships,
Hmm.
and the turnaround times were absolutely insane. There was like, you're pumping out multiple ads a day, mostly After Effects work. But then there was another guy there, Al, and he knew cinema pretty well. And he got me like maybe I shouldn't blow Al's spot up. He got me like a torrented C4D,
I feel like
and
it's a rite of passage for every
you
person at
got
some
to.
point is you
I
have
mean,
to, and then like you pay your dues back by
yeah,
like getting it actually.
yeah. Back then, I mean, C4D was like $3,600. So
Yeah.
it's not, I'm fresh out of school, I got no
Mm-hmm.
money, so that's not gonna fly. But yeah, I learned a lot from him, and then I started I think I watched Hello Lux.
Yep.
Those
Mm-hmm.
guys, they had this thing called Learn C4D in 1 day or 8 hours.
Mm.
And I took that, and I that gave me a great base, and I was like, okay, I feel comfortable now in cinema. And then I left there, worked for a little bit at big corporation called Booz Allen Hamilton. It's consulting government work, and it's
Mm.
interesting to see like, so I hit like sports, then I did
Yeah.
advertising, then I did corporate, and then after that, I learned a lot there too. There's a lot of guys there that were just 3D guys and like Maya
Mm-hmm.
and Max, and that's where I started to pick up like modeling, like 3D modeling and stuff
Okay.
like that. So after that, I left and came up to New York City because I was like always wanted to live in New
Mm-hmm.
York City. I grew up in Connecticut, so not too far
Okay.
away. Um, but once I got here, I worked for the Barclays Center for about a
Okay.
year doing like
Cool.
the same stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
then I
Like
went
screens and
to,
stuff.
yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
stadium graphics, the Carlton cam, like the funny cameras or,
Yeah.
or whatever. And then I did freelance after that.
Cool.
And I think freelance is where it's at for
Yeah.
us.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's where we're at now. I think it's 4 years I've been freelancing now.
Yeah.
So
That's 4 years. Yeah. Same or a little less than that. I think it's been like almost 3 at this point. But yeah, I think that it's so interesting how each person like goes through like the steps up from like basically starting as like 2D or even just like video, like understanding that basic, like going into After Effects, like if you want to do like the 2.5D, you're like, I know cameras and like I know where to put things. Or even if you're an illustrator, you just understand it. Did you ever get into like Element 3D or like any video Copilot stuff in your like After Effects era or no?
yeah, like when I was in school, I remember downloading jet effects or some shit
Mm-hmm.
like that, and it was like these 3D models of the jets, and they had like explosions and smoke plumes and stuff like that. And I dabbled in Element 3D, but even then, I kind of knew, I was like, this is not very flexible, and it's
Right. Yeah. And
yeah,
that's where like Cinema 4D is like, oh, these are all the things that like aren't hidden behind this like curtain.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you can access all of it kind of thing.
It's not, yeah, like I feel like Element's trying to jam 3D into
It's like a
After
miniature game
Effects.
engine essentially.
Yeah,
I think is
and
how a lot of it works.
it's very impressive though.
It's
Like when you think
I don't
about it.
understand the black magic
Yeah,
inside of how that runs. I guess it's a shell really. Like runs
yeah.
it's open. It's its own little thing. But
Mhm.
yeah, the way that it interacts was like I was just blown away because I didn't even really think of 3D. I was like, oh, like in my After Effects stuff was like you just pull assets. Like there's
Mm.
an explosion asset or there's like a this asset, and then like once you thought of like, oh, 3D can make the things, like you can make any asset essentially and put it into,
Right.
like, you're not limited to the footage you shoot or whatever you can download. You're like, oh, it's like its own little thing.
Yeah.
Kind of is like a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
um Back to the like machinima stuff, like did
Sure.
that teach you anything about like camera positioning and like all of that stuff where you could like test it
Yeah.
out in like a, I would assume you're
Um,
doing it like in Forge where it's like
Hell yeah,
unlimited.
dude.
Yeah.
Forge. Yes. We used to, so it was kind of really, it was cool. I had like a group of friends, and it was like one of them was in Florida, another one was in like Canada, all met through, did we meet? I think it was through some sort of form board or something that
Hmm.
was like for Halo whatnot. And the guy had already started something called Dispatch Films. You can look it up on YouTube now. There's like the videos are still there. But yeah, I think it taught me a lot about, because with Halo and doing machinima, you don't have the 3D camera. Like you can do some stuff, but really you're like limited to like your character
And
view.
where
So
you
you're
can
like,
pace them, yeah, you can put them in
yeah,
a vehicle or
mhm,
not, or like standing on stuff that you've like
yeah,
placed like blocks and stuff. But yeah, you're
yeah,
pretty, you can't have like an animated track or anything of like how
yeah.
to move the camera.
So it's like almost what you could do is you could have the camera guy on top of a car and then somebody driving the car to get like, and it's like so ridiculous, but it does teach you to have like more of like a physical camera in the space,
Mm-hmm.
like you would in real life, as opposed to going full 3D where, some people, you see this a lot, I think with juniors, is the camera movements are just like insane. Like they're just
Yeah.
like flying all over the place like a fighter jet. And it's like, I like to try to keep cameras more grounded. Like how would it move in real life? That sort of like what did the set break with those?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that maybe lends better to doing CG work, because that's you're not going to get taken out by
Yeah,
insane camera
I
moves.
think the
But
the comparison of like Pacific Rim 1 to 2 is like always
mm,
like a thing that's held up of like you can make things feel grounded and bigger, like in 1 where like, yeah, you didn't have any of those like crazy like just floating CG cameras that happens a lot where it's just like up the amount of a skyscraper floating in the middle of a city. It's like, is this a helicopter shot? Is it like, how did we get this shot that we're like saying is plausibly real in this
yeah,
movie, kind of thing.
mhm,
And I think like Forge does it, but like I feel like a lot of people I knew were just like kids with like camcorders. Like that
mhm,
also teaches you like kind of, you're limited to like where you can put this thing. Like it's a
yeah,
tripod or it's you're doing really bad like shaky cam, or
just
like you
stacking it on
can't,
some
yeah, you
hooks.
can't
Yeah,
have like a drone shot of stuff, so you kind of are like, you're creatively limited to that and like figuring it out.
yeah.
And I think the other thing is like in junior work is just I didn't understand easing of like my, or how to
Oh
ease
yeah,
stuff.
dude.
Everything was like a very
Yeah,
either jerky
it's
or
like
like weirdly easy eased between stuff, and it
yeah.
just like didn't feel good at all. But
Mm.
I feel
You
like,
know
yeah, you kind of go wild with it
what's
when you're
funny about
beginning.
that is I feel like there's this curve where you start out doing all the linear shit and then you start figuring out like the speed graph in
Mm-hmm.
After Effects or whatever, and you're like, all right, swoops and nice, and then it like you get the thing where the camera's like this and it goes like and stops again,
Yeah.
which is also kind of awkward. So then now I'm back to like doing linear, but
Right.
just like making sure it never stops. And it's like
Yeah.
it's kind of funny how it goes like that. But the Halo stuff, I think what really helped me the most with that, first of all, we were working with, it's like what we're doing now, like remote work. I'm working
Mm-hmm.
with people spread out across the US, um, and Canada. And then we're all like, I was at first, I just like did the video capture stuff to capture the
Mm.
camera angles that I was doing in Halo. And then I started to learn Premiere. And so I started cutting it. Then I add on After Effects to start adding in effects. And
Mm-hmm.
then like learning all that stuff, like there's obviously a whole market now that you
Yeah.
can access. And I did do like some film festivals with that stuff. I remember I went to like New York City when I was like 16 or 15, and they had like a little film festival there, and it was really cool. Like they showed my film up on the thing, and there's a bunch of people there that are also doing like, you remember like Source filmmaker,
Yeah.
a lot of people doing like Half-Life stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really cool experience because I got to meet a lot of the people that I liked watching their stuff, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
damn, this is really cool. Um, And that was, yeah, that's kind of how I got into everything. I mean, before that, I don't know if you ever did this, but claymation or Lego stop
Legomation,
motion.
yeah, of
Yeah.
just like, yeah, pretty easy. And then not even like any, I mean, now like there's cool stuff like your iPad can do the onion skinning, but it was like literally just like
Mhm.
my mom's camera and like
Yep.
hoping that it like locked up properly and like just with a flash because I didn't know how to light stuff. And it's just
Yeah.
like
Yep.
watching like, and it spent like a whole day to get maybe like
Hmm.
48 frames out. And you're like, oh
Oh
my
yeah.
God, this is so short.
It's funny. It's like I had the camcorder and I would like just click the button real quick. So it was a video, not a frame. So I was super young, probably like
Uh,
9 or something. So it was just like it's not working. It's like
yeah.
half a second instead of
Yeah.
a single frame. But yeah, that stuff. I think all that stuff's super important to do when you're younger, because it's like kind of I don't know about you, but when I was in college, I was kind of like, I don't know what I'm gonna do when I get out of
Mm,
college, because I didn't know what motion design was. And I think that finding out that there's this whole industry, or well, this, I guess, discipline that covers multiple industries,
mm-hmm.
is like, it's like, oh man, like this is actually like a whole mountain you can climb and
Right.
be successful and do lots of cool stuff without, maybe going traditional film route. And then,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always a fan of title sequences, like James Bond and all the
Yeah.
other films had some awesome title sequences. And figuring out, I think when I really started to click is when I found Ash Thorpe,
Okay.
because he was doing back then like Ender's Game
Mm-hmm.
and
All the UI and like
yeah.
film FUI stuff.
Hmm. And obviously everyone else was looking at him as well
Yeah.
back then. But that was like, oh, dude, there's like a whole like area of this, because what I was doing back then was like the cutesy explainer video stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like to start off. And I was like, this is cool. Like, at least I'm making money. But like, that's the stuff that I like. That's the actual stuff
Right.
that I like. Like, I'm a science fiction nerd and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So I'm like, fuck yeah, that's so cool. So then listening to his podcast, Collective Podcast. I remember
Mm-hmm.
I used to listen to that when he did it like a ton when I was first starting out,
Yep.
and listening to all these different concept artists and whatnot. And so I definitely like slingshot though around, because I kind of want to do everything, which is a problem. You
Yeah.
can't do everything.
Right.
But, I think dabbling in stuff, even just for like a month, like learning how to use ZBrush or Sculpt or whatever, you can
Mm-hmm.
get pretty good pretty quick if you're, you know, dedicated to a few hours a day.
Right.
Like, you don't have to be Rolf Cressetti or whoever
Yeah.
that is doing these crazy things. But yeah, I think, being curious about different avenues
Mm-hmm.
you can take is good.
Yeah. I think in college, our first 2 years were like just building block basics of like color theory, art
Mhm.
history, like a typography class. Like it was just like a lot of things to set you up to like, and I didn't really even know what I wanted to do. Like when people asked, I was like, I don't know, like commercials, like whatever happens, like it could be like the type in commercials or like
Mhm.
the filming of them or like somewhat of like I didn't know what the name of it was, but like when things move like and they're not in the scene,
Yep.
like whatever those things are, like I want to do that.
Mhm.
um and so yeah, like once I started applying to internships, like I had to look up studios where it's like my friends were getting internships at like Google or like at more like ad agencies for like graphic design. And I was like, I don't even know what places to go to.
Yep.
Like, and so you just start like looking up like who made this, and it's like this studio. And you're like, okay, I'll apply to that studio. It's like who made this thing I like this studio. And you're like, okay, I'll apply to that studio to be an intern. And then once you start seeing the studios, you start understanding like the like nomenclature of like what to be looking for or what even these things are. And then I mean at that point I knew like After Effects, Cinema 4D were like the titles of like things I wanted to be under. And then
Yep.
you found out like, oh, it's motion design encompasses
Yep.
both of those.
Bread and butter.
um yeah, and so
Easy.
yeah, I mean you can just run with those two basics pretty
Oh yeah,
much and
for your
do
entire
a ton
career.
of work. Yeah. um
Yeah, I think that's a thing too. We touched on this earlier before the call, but like climbing the technical side, like I see a lot of people trying to do Houdini
mhm.
and stuff like that. And I think maybe if you're like a solo guy and doing indie or whatever, that's cool. But I found like when I go into a lot of places, like they're not looking for me to do that kind of work, even
Not
if,
really.
yeah, like I think the smaller the place, the better chance you'll get to do cool stuff like that. But
yeah,
It's
there's
yeah.
like a dip where it's like,
Hmm.
oh, that's nice. Like we said before, it's like you can either be like the surprise, like, oh, you do, great, we have like an open license, like if you, whatever you can kick out, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
And then there's like a big dip of like nobody needs you, and then there's
Yep.
like, oh, you're a specialist, like you're a
Hmm.
Houdini specialist, and like you're on this team and you know this pipeline, and like we're not expecting you to like YouTube your way through doing this thing. We're
Yeah.
expecting you to like pretty much know it and like
Yeah.
have it solved for us, and only be
Hmm.
here like a couple days and like get it done. There's just like a big gap where it's like learning that threshold is like a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of time invested before you're
Hmm.
like at the other end of it, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Houdini is a tough one. I've definitely tried to pick it up a few times. But then I always think to myself, like, why though? Like,
Yeah.
why would I? What do I need from this? And I think is it Simon Holmiddle? He
Hmm.
had like a talk about it, and he was like if you're hitting the ceiling in C4D, then sure, go to Houdini.
Yeah.
But if you're not, then
It's like
you
a
know what's
lot
the
of
point?
this can be done there.
Yeah. But then
um
you see some of the things people are putting out. It's like, damn, it looks easy. Some of the stuff, it's like it will help you. Like the way I was trying to look at, because I'm always debating like what should I be learning, you know,
hmm
like what like how to progress in a certain direction. It's like, will Houdini make my life easier or will it make it harder? You know,
right.
and will it allow me to create the kind of things I want to create in the time though, like that I have
Hmm.
available. Even personal work, like I don't like. I think personal work motivates me a ton more than professional, you know, paid work a lot of the times. I think
Right.
that's part of the reason why I'm freelance is that I have time to do my own cool stuff,
Hmm.
like the Unreal Engine short, and then that was kind of a learning experience too. You know, like we didn't know Unreal Engine,
Hmm.
um, and I think that's another thing too is like asking ourselves the same questions with. I was just with Houdini, like, will this make our lives easier to do, and will it make the image better?
Right.
And I don't know. I think Unreal is it's crazy to be able to render out that many frames,
And you
but
guys were doing that in 4 before even like 5 came out with it, like,
yeah.
which would drastically change the workflow of
Mhm.
like all of that stuff and make it even easier.
Yeah, five is. I mean, I put some stuff into five and like multiple rigged characters, and it's just like running at 100 FPS with it looks
Hmm.
freaking amazing. Um, but it's still like a game engine. It's not
Yeah,
like really
there are
built
still
for us.
workarounds and
Yeah,
different things.
so it's kind of weird in that respect, but yeah, it's always like looking at different things. And I think, you know, in our industry, you need to be a little bit curious about that stuff, depending on, you know, what, if you want to be a 3D guy, I think you should probably be looking into those things.
Hmm.
Because, you know, Seiji uses Houdini, and he's done some cool stuff in there. And I think stuff that would be hard to do in cinema, you know?
Hmm.
So it makes sense to use. It's like just use the tool, whatever tool is the best, and it's
Right.
gonna get you
Yeah, not
your thing
hopping into
done.
something because it,
Yeah.
like, there was one cool feature kind of
Mhm.
thing where it's like, like you could
Yeah.
probably find a better use. I always like, my only switch was obviously it's like it was the cool thing. It was like
Mhm.
the, oh, like go learn that, and like you're the smart motion graphics guy.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
but I was just tired of like the amount of plugins I had in cinema.
Oh
I was like,
yeah.
this is the dumbest thing. I have like 6 different plugins. One's to do like pyro, one's to do like particles, one's to break stuff, one's to do this thing. And I was like, one's to unwrap, one's to like do cloth, like marvelous. I was like, this is getting out of hand. And then it was like, oh, and indie is like $400 every
Oh
two
yeah.
years and you're like, well, I'm
Yeah.
absolutely gonna do that. And like also open up a whole another can of worms, which is like,
Mhm.
it just has all this other resources, which Side Effects is amazing at. And now with like their game engine lab stuff, it's like
Yeah.
tons
Side
of
effects.
really quick tools that are amazing,
Yeah.
like photogrammetry stuff. And then like once I saw that they were really gunning to integrate with like Unreal, I was like, okay, like this is like, yeah, you can't bring your X particle setup really easily into like
Nope.
Unreal. Like it's just tied
Yeah.
into cinema. I was like, this
Mhm.
might make more sense.
Oh
And
yeah.
then, you know, the I think the holy grail is like Blender, and Houdini is like the
Yep.
cheapest, most high
Yeah.
quality bar, or with Unreal, is like that you can
Yeah.
get. It's just like, that's like, you know,
Mhm.
I've sunk way too many hours into cinema where I was like, I opened Blender, I was like, this, when I watch people do stuff, is seems very intuitive, and then I'm in there
Yeah.
like,
Yep.
I can't, I don't know why, it's so weird.
It's the
But that
whole
was,
shortcuts. It's all shortcuts. It's all a keyboard. It's
Yeah.
like everything's hidden. But I think for modeling, I started using Blender, and it's amazing. Like it's
Hmm.
so much better than Cinema. Cinema feels like kitty gloves now, trying to model anything in it.
That's what I have seen. Yeah, like
Yeah.
Ian Hubert,
Oh, dude,
like some of
that's
his
amazing.
videos where you just like watch him model a truck and you're like, huh. Like I know
Yeah.
these tools in cinema, but yeah, every time it's just not as intuitive or
Mm.
like easy of a flow to like get into where you're like modeling hard surface is I
Yep.
think like what I've seen. I just
Yeah.
don't model that much, like the
Yeah. I mean,
little
what's
amount
the point?
that I
Really?
do, and then
Mhm.
like the other things where it's like, it seems like neck and neck with other things I use where it's like, yeah, like they came out with a cool real-time render like thing, like Eve was like really big, and then like everyone else like Redshift and stuff is like, yeah, we're pretty close there too, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, like yeah.
Yeah. That's another thing too with Unreal is like it's cool, but like our tools are gonna catch up. I think, hopefully, if you know. But another thing with Houdini is the pace of development is insane. Like they're always pushing and doing things and making it easier to use. Like I'll switch to
Hmm.
Houdini if I can do more generalist tasks in there, easy, and maybe not have the stigma of being like an effects guy, but just
Right.
like and I've heard that's happening though. Like I not necessarily in our industry, but in like visual effects, a lot of people are moving to Houdini for lighting, scene, set dressing, and
I mean, they're really pushing, like it seems like next 5 years, like
mm,
they like Solaris was a big thing they came out with, and then they've really been pushing USD, which
mm,
is kind of seems like the utopia of 3D, which is like, the thing of like people are hesitant to Blender because it doesn't seem like production, like people don't think of it in that terms, or like a
mm,
place is like we're Maya only because that's what we've done and that's what we always do. But like USD Material X kind of stuff is like everybody and anybody. Like if we just all hop to USD, and they're kind of really posing themselves as like, come here with your USD and we'll like stage light and do everything inside of like our own thing, which I think is really smart for them. And they,
yeah,
yeah, their pace is consistent, and also like only a few times do they completely like rewrite something and like make it better. But if they do, there's like obvious reasons. Whereas I feel like a lot of places just keep doing the Adobe bloat onto stuff, and you're
yeah,
like, this this even good to
yeah,
keep pushing this thing
yeah,
forward? And I feel like if it isn't, they're like, it's close, but we scrapped the whole thing and now it runs like
mm,
10 times faster. You're like,
yeah.
wow, this
That's
is
the
very
thing.
smart.
Like I just want that from cinema. Like I'm like just make it faster. And talking about the $400 indie license, and then you need to plug in for cinema, you need to get turbulence FD, you need to get X particles, you need to get it ends up being as much as a Houdini license at the end of the day, like
Right.
with all the plugins and the monthly thing. So it's like, you know, I think that in 5 years, you're probably right. I think we might both be using Houdini only,
Right.
if we want to be like 3D guys. But I think there's still like a lot of steps to go before then, just because it seems like they're targeting animation workflows too, with like kind effects and mobs and all that stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We'll see. I'm
Yeah.
always down to learn something new. That's all I'm
Right.
saying. Like,
Yeah, that was the thing. Is like I think I got into Houdini at like 14.5, maybe 14, and
that's
the
pretty
jump
early.
from there to um like where we're at now. I mean, that was
Mm-hmm.
like the first time, like, I ran like full tilt at it multiple times, and I think like it didn't stick until about like 16.5 or something,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like I didn't forget it every time I stopped using it.
Right.
um and yeah, like you said, the artist usability, they're like, they started as like it's totally like kind of the joke of like build the universe and then
Yeah.
build like the world and then build your computer and then build the node that you need, kind of thing,
Yeah.
where it's like, there's too many pieces out like that I can't figure out. And now they're
Mm.
like, we've already done that, so people that want to do that will do that. And then it's like their people internally have like pieced together like essentially a plugin, and they're like, use this if you're a
Yeah.
not big power user. But the best part is like, if you are a power user, it's not like cinema where it releases like, a deformer, and you're like, I
Mm.
wish I could do this thing in there. And it's like, too
Yeah.
bad. It's a lockbox. You can't do anything. You just go
Yep.
inside and you're like, tweak these things, change it to what I want, and then pull back out. And you're like, that's perfect. Like, it's for every level of user. Don't go in it if you don't want to
Yeah.
go inside. It's just
Yeah.
like
Literally.
plug in your model. Like I used it for a job where we just kept getting ZBrush sculpts, and it's like
Hmm.
to unwrap, UV, UDIM
Oh
that,
yeah.
clean it up, and get curvature passes was like in cinema. That's a nightmare every
Oh
new
yeah.
time one comes in.
Forget
But
it.
like
Yeah.
one node that I didn't know what was happening. There were just I plugged it in,
Yes, it was the
clicked
side
some
effects
boxes,
labs.
yeah, and it just
Yeah.
kicks it out and it like gamifies it. And I'm like, great,
Hell
that's
yeah.
all I need. I don't need to be in there figuring out writing vex or anything. I just need it to work. And I think
Mhm.
people are like, don't think of it yet as that easy. Like
Yeah.
the side effects lab really is their like for the C4D people, I think, node where it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, we
Usability.
figured it out. Don't
Yeah.
even
Don't worry
bother.
about it.
But then it
Yeah.
plays nice with all of the like right after side effects like lab node, you can go write some vex or do any of the other things,
Hmm.
let it talk to anything, and then it's good to go. And then you just kick it out, bring it back into cinema. It was just so much easier where I think people don't
Yeah.
really think about it in that term.
For sure. I mean, me and you both worked on some heavy ZBrush sculpts with the Shang-Chi thing,
Yeah.
and cinema, like the viewport alone is it starts to get kind of crappy when you're doing that kind of work. So Houdini probably is probably fine when you're doing, you know, more higher end stuff like that. But
Yeah. I mean, it's just yeah, it's I mean like multi-threaded, like it's just down to like it can handle just so much more. Like I
yeah,
remember we were trying to get like groom hairs and like cinema wouldn't open it. It's just like no,
yep,
not even gonna try, that's too much for me. And it's like, well, we need to look at this, and so it's like we had to open it in Houdini kind of thing. um
yeah.
it's
That's.
just
I mean, it depends. I feel like for what we're doing, like we're keep trying to I'm trying to make things that look like more photoreal, and I think you are
mhm.
too for the most part. And it's like, yeah, I need you need like the extra multi-threading, and you need to have like a good viewport, I think, to work quickly. But then cinema, it's like really good at busting things out really quickly
Yeah,
for whatever, and especially quick turnaround times. You know, there's like when there's no time for R&D or anything like that, you
yeah.
just kind of get in there and do it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like Blender in some areas, but it's like just use the tool for what it's good at and then throw
Hmm.
the rest out. You know, like I'm not. I did do some like rigs in there. They like added some Mixamo things where you
Mm.
can like take the Mixamo rig and it'll auto add control rigs to it, which is really helpful. And I found animating in Blender like for traditional joints,
Right.
and you know that way better than
Oh,
cinema, and like animation layers, all that stuff. It's like in there,
then like
but
the F curve like manager and stuff that like cinema has.
yeah, I do
Hmm.
like the F curve manager and all that stuff, but just like rigged characters in cinema are it's kind of a pain in the butt. And it's like really not that many people are doing that anyways. So I get why they wouldn't really focus there. Um, but it does seem kind of like it's getting like cinema's getting a little long in the tooth, but you know, it's still a great program. You probably use it every day, you know, both of us. So
Yeah, I mean, I that's where I'm always like, is this the easiest, or do I just continually use
mm,
this
yeah,
way more? I mean, by a long shot, more than any other program. So I just like, anytime
yeah,
there is like the battle, which I mean, when you're working for someone, you don't have the time to like be like, I think I'll take the longer route this time. Like you have to go with what's going to get it out in like the next hour kind of thing. So it's like
yeah,
I always default to like, I'll just like, get it out in this like weird janky way and it'll
yeah.
be good versus like getting it correct technically or learning a
Mm,
better workflow for it, which is I think kind of the reason you need personal projects where it's like there is no hard deadline and you can like hopefully learn a better way
yes,
to
yeah.
put it like in your tool set of like, oh yeah, I'd always been like fudging it this way, but I could actually do it properly this
Yep.
way, and then like
Yep.
that for later kind of thing.
Totally. I think personal projects, I mean, if you have the time to do them, and they don't have to be long. Like for me, I'm always doing like some ridiculous, it's always something longer. And the problem is like I'll start something to learn some workflow, and then all of a sudden it's like a minute long piece with character animation, which I have no freaking idea how to do. And then, you know, all these other things. But then you learn and you feel it out and stuff. But part of the thing is, at least with some of the personal work I'm doing, is like okay, so I learned how to do some character animation, but I'm not a character animator, like not anywhere near it. It just looks
Mm-hmm.
passable. Like from a professional standpoint of like getting work, which you shouldn't look at it always like that, but from that perspective, it's like not that useful to know
Right.
that stuff. Maybe I would be able to help out, or if someone gave me something and I needed to tweak it, I could maybe do
Hmm.
something like that. But other than that, there is some things where it's just, creating stuff to create stuff. And if cinema, if you know it and you got the muscle memory down, sometimes I'm thinking like, man, like I want to use Blender for this whole project just to learn it, but that's going to be 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I could just use cinema and I can do it in like 1 week.
Right.
It's like, what's better?
So what's
Time and
the I mean, speaking of your personal projects, like you did the alien thing and it seemed like
mm,
that was a lot of like learning
oh
ZBrush.
yeah,
Like you did some ZBrush and then
yep.
that was in Blender as well, I think.
I uh, modeled everything in Blender. There's like this hallway, the hard
Hmm.
surface hallway, all that's Blender. And then I did the alien in ZBrush, and I had kind of picked up ZBrush that year, or I think right before the pandemic, I bought it, and I just,
Yeah.
you know how it goes. Like you
Same.
pick
Yeah.
software
And
up, and
which
you're
is
like, what am I
good
doing?
move because now it's
Oh
tied behind.
yeah,
Like we got it right
that's
before it's
interesting.
gone.
Yeah,
Yeah. Or
that's
not
really
gone,
interesting.
but
Yeah, well, who knows?
month
I
to
mean,
month now. Yeah.
yeah, I guess people will probably be hanging on to their ZBrush license. I think Maxon won't fuck it up, but you
Yeah.
never know.
They haven't majorly destroyed anything that
Mm,
they've bought.
no,
They've
it
just
could
made
just,
licensing a big pain with everything
yes,
they've
that
bought, where
is
it's just like,
true.
oh my god, especially if you bought it previously. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't know. I think a lot of people were upset with that. And I understand why. But like some people bought ZBrush in like 2004
and
and
have
they
had
haven't made
perma,
anything.
yeah,
It's like,
um,
what, like, what's that business model? I don't know. But if it's reasonably priced, because we don't know what they're going to do,
right,
that's awesome. Because ZBrush, I gets a lot of shit for having that crazy UI or whatever. But I
yeah,
feel like when I'm sculpting stuff in it, I feel more, it's like, more artistic in a way. And the UI is ridiculous, but it does kind of make sense in regards to using a tablet like a Cintiq or
yeah.
something. But yeah, I don't know. I think the Alien project was definitely trying to learn a little bit more about that. Like the Alien itself is like really mid poly, and
Mm.
then everything's with displacement maps,
So you like
and that,
sculpted up and then
yeah,
baked
and
to
you
get.
can in ZBrush you can like export the displacement maps, and that helped directly on what we worked on together
Mm.
because we had all these characters that were like cinema wouldn't load them, but
Yeah,
they have all these details. So what I was doing, I was going in and baking the displacement maps down onto them, and it worked perfectly for the most part on the two characters or whatever that it ended up, because even then we didn't have time on some of the other ones, but it worked, and that was directly from a personal project.
mm.
And even just going into ZBrush and getting the assets from the vendor that are huge, like 100 million poly or points,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, dude, there's no way to open this without ZBrush.
Yeah.
Like you just need ZBrush to do it. So like the personal project directly led into me being able to utilize assets from ILM or
Yeah.
DNet or whoever's sending us stuff, and it was that. So there's definitely like a good payoff from, I think, doing your own work, and plus it's cool. Like I think
Yeah.
Xenomorph, I love the Xenomorph, love Alien. Um,
And then your Halo Reach, I think it would be Reach, or is it ODST?
I'm working on that now. I'm working, so I have this a bunch of friends on a Discord server, and we all met through this online class, um, with Mike Nash. You know Mike Nash? He's like a
Maybe.
hard surface artist. He did like Horizon Zero Dawn.
Okay.
The video game he like made the robot mechs.
Oh.
So that's another thing I like to do is just take classes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, because there's so much knowledge that you can just
Yeah.
and get it from the person too, which is so cool. Um, and it's like the best source you can get it from, drinking like directly from the well.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, met all these people through there, and we have our own little Discord server, and everyone like kind of does something different. There's a lot of like VFX people, and everyone kind of motivates each other to do personal work. So we kind of like combined forces, me and another guy, Alex, and he modeled like a bunch of cool hard surface pods and stuff like that for the environment. And then I kind of like made the ODST, like
Mm-hmm.
model the armor and then like rigged them up. And it's a ton of work. It's not done yet. I've done like 3 shots or something. And I'm learning a little bit of Nuke too. And another guy in the group, Chris, helped me figure out Nuke. And he's like, he's a big Nuke guy. So yeah, you should do this, you should do that. And he had this tool to do shine and like
Oh, cool. Yeah.
commercial glow. And I'm using like the non-commercial nuke,
Hmm.
which and it's fine.
Yeah.
Like
I think it's like pretty much fully fledged. It's
yeah,
just like don't use it for other stuff. I think it's
yeah,
limited on export, right? It's like
yeah.
down
You
to
can
only
only do
1920.
Yeah, you can only do HD, but then there's all these like upscalers now.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
so,
Topaz,
and
just throw it
that's
right
the
in.
that stuff is amazing. I use it on the alien thing where I rendered at like what we normally render at perception and then just upscaled it to 4K and it couldn't even tell. I could not
Do
tell
you
the
have the
difference.
video upscaler or just the image batch one?
Um the I think it's the video one.
Yeah, the video one's great. I did not know that there is a cache folder that you should not delete, which is what it's learning from. So it's like
Oh,
every time you do it, it's like figuring out like
hmm,
how to do it better for the next one. And I
yeah,
deleted it and
you
it
lost all your
reset all of that. And I was like, oh no, like, that's
damn.
what it was learning from. But yeah, their
Yeah.
suite of stuff, even the like, I use it a lot for uprising textures just that
Mm,
I get. It doesn't like goof them up really, I've noticed, because like there's the
mm,
issue of like if you have a normal map and like another map, if it thinks different things on each one of them, then like it won't line up when it upscales it. Haven't had
mm-hmm.
any issues. So like for a face going from like 1K to like 8K
Yeah, it's crazy.
fills in enough detail to like really fix it, which is really help when you're just like
Yeah.
limited to what someone hands you and you're like,
Oh
this is
man.
not gonna cut it.
Yeah. I feel like
um,
we're on like the cusp of some crazy stuff. Like in the next like 5 to 10 years, like our whole workflow is going to be like upended with this machine learning stuff. I
yeah,
think it's going to come quicker than we expect, I think. But right now, I mean, I just hope that my tools get faster and you can do cooler stuff
yeah, I
as
think
we go
there's
forward.
always the fear of like the robots doing it all, where it's
Robots.
like I think it like maybe sure, but then like then you're in like a utopia where it's like
Yeah,
why
it's
does
like,
anyone work for anything?
man,
But like
whatever.
before that it's like you just sit and like art direct a robot around would be
Yeah,
totally fun, and it's just kind
yeah.
of made up to like whatever you can imagine you can have, as long
I
as you can
mean,
articulate you can have it made, sort
yeah.
of thing.
When you think
um
about what we do, sometimes we're basically robots, dude. You
yeah,
know,
where
like,
you're
yeah,
just
yeah, move this left, move this right. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, we're like a slower stage thing of like
yeah,
you pitch four things, they pick one, you pitch four, and just like whittles down to like what
yeah,
every the group consensus is like a good thing.
yeah.
Where yeah, if each person could just do it, it would be super fun. But I don't know. There's always some of those days where you're like just zenning out to like the most monotonous,
Oh yeah,
repetitive task. And you're just like, this is kind of nice. Just like put
yeah.
music on and do this for 8 hours
And
and clock
yeah,
out.
there's always this threshold I have to get past where it's like, uh, there's some things that seem like they're hard, I think, but really they're not. They're just take a long time. And it's
Yeah.
like for instance, some illustrator work, like maybe you're making like grids or textures or whatever, and it's just like it's going to take a while. And sometimes I'll go down like a YouTube, Google rabbit hole. How do I automate this? How do I make this quicker? When really it's just like, dude, just do it. Just
Yeah.
like get in there and spend like 4 hours or whatever, like zoned in doing. And then sometimes though, you'll pass off projects or other things like that, and you got to make sure that like you don't want to have someone else have to go in
Yeah.
if it needs to be changed. Like they're gonna have to
Hmm.
spend 4 hours like friggin' doing stuff or whatever. But I don't know. I think I think honestly we'll be fine, especially with personal work. Like a lot of I know both of us like to do a lot of personal work, and like
Hmm.
if it makes that easier and I can do bigger things, I could do
Right.
better, like 5-10 minute short, like fully CG and have like lasers and robots and all the cool shit. I'll be happy. I'll be like, all right,
Yeah.
let's see. But
I
I don't
think
know.
that you mentioned like, you learned some character rigging stuff where it's like, what is the use case for this in like the professional realm? But like a lot of times I'm just like, oh, it's like a storytelling device. Like
Mm-hmm.
those are hard to like have people like, you're kind of like, if you aren't like a character person or you can't get an asset of a character doing what you want, you're just stuck without a
Mm-hmm.
character. You're just like,
Yeah.
I guess I animate other things and like, or I use like just other devices. But like it was kind of fun when like Mixmo came around. Like even as crappy as it was, you're like,
Oh yeah.
oh shoot, I can, like, that was a big threshold for a long time. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you just couldn't get characters to move in your pieces. You're just like, I don't
Yeah.
know, I'll
That's
just do like environments without
yeah.
them, and then you're like, oh crap, like I can now redirect them to do stuff, and like move them in the scene, even if they're not doing anything or it's not like about the character, but like just little guys like walking around just like really adds to it. And I think that those sorts of things where it's like, just enough to add it in as a little thing to like help sell anything that you're trying to do.
Mm.
Like Substance Painter coming along was a big thing
Oh,
for me, where
love it.
it's like before I was just cube map, like it was before Triplane, I was just cube map
Yep.
everything, and like that's how I got by on like all of my texturing, and like it
Yep.
didn't work all the time, but then you're like, oh, I didn't even want to know how to UV stuff, but like once you're like, oh, I guess I'll UV, and that
That's
was a
another
big
one of those
pain, and
things.
that's now an
Yeah.
easy thing now, like
Mm.
Rhizome or
Yep.
different stuff. I mean, Cinema's even updated it, but like
Yeah.
there's always just these next steps of like, I guess I have to learn that to do this thing now.
Yeah.
But then once you can
Yeah.
do like custom painting on stuff, like
It's even using the
crazy.
smart materials. Like you can build
Mm-hmm.
something so quick. And what I really like about Substance Painter is it's render engine agnostic. So if I'm like, I've done this maybe too many times, but on the alien thing, I started in Octane
Oh,
and
you
I was like,
swap.
this, I was like, it's crashing. As I couldn't like light selections. It was,
Mm.
I don't know. I wasn't, the image looked great though. And sometimes I think like, man, maybe I should have used Octane because it looked so freaking real but I went to Redshift and it wasn't that big of a deal because everything I had built every texture in Substance Painter. So it was
Right.
just reconnecting the maps and then
Mm-hmm.
boom, now it's in Redshift.
Do you have that
Not a
one
big deal.
plugin that does like the super nice like auto export? It's
Yeah,
like
I
that
think it's
little dream catcher
Oxytotal or
looking thing. I
yeah,
don't know. Yeah, that's the
some weird name.
best because I've just kind of given up. Like I thought it was fun to know all the little
Yeah.
numbers, like between that and Bridge, where it's just like
Mm-hmm.
just send it and know
Yeah.
what to do, and then obviously inside you're like, nah, that's not correct, and then you like adjust
Yeah.
it and like finesse it. Don't run with
Mm-hmm.
it like vanilla, but
Totally.
like yeah, I've just given up because yeah, between that and like Quixel, it sucks to have both of them, but like they each have their very really good merits to like
Oh yeah.
what they with both of them they cover like literally everything you'll need.
Yep.
Have you used Mixer at all? Like
Uh,
Quixel's Painter,
I
essentially.
did use it a little bit. I did like this music video for a friend, and it was like in a sewer, and
Mm.
I like went in a mixer and mixed together some materials. They have like a good rain node in there. Have you
Mm-hmm.
used it? You know, they have the puddle thing.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
like
Where like,
puddle the yeah,
mm-hmm.
like adds procedural puddles, and it looks really good. So I was like, all
Yeah.
right, I'll just do that, and then just tiled everything in
Mm.
the tube because it was just like a cylinder. I was like, I'm not gonna paint this
Yeah.
or even do it in Redshift. Like a lot of the times, building. I think I've got to a point where if I'm building stuff in Substance Painter, I like it more now, and it's kind of a problem because you need to have UV maps on everything, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you just need to build stuff procedurally. Um, Especially if you're working in Redshift, like on most of the stuff we're working on, I feel like I don't have the opportunity to use Substance Painter as much as I would like to
Yeah.
because the whole UV thing. And I think that Cinema still has a long way to go with their
Yeah.
UV tools. They don't do UDIMs or anything like that, which I
Mm-hmm.
did. That was another thing I learned with the Alien thing is I did UDIMs.
Yeah. Which
I
is
know.
the goofiest workaround to get it to work, where it's like Cinema doesn't recognize it, but
Nope.
everybody else does, and
Yeah.
so it just like Cinema's just oblivious to that it's happening in the background. Like
Yeah.
it's just like I don't know why things are shifted over, but
Nope.
sure, I guess if you
That's
name it silly with the 1001 through the
yeah.
other
Zero
one, I'll
one
just
zero
pick it
one.
up. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like the the thing with Cinema is a big thing that I like about Blender as opposed to Cinema is Blender's viewport. I can see what I'm doing a lot of the times, like look dev wise. So I
Mm.
can like light the scene, and you can even do like there's so many cool shader effects you can do, like a game engine style
Mm-hmm.
where you're just doing everything with like a wipe on with like a sick glow coming out. With doing that in cinema is kind of hard because you need to use the render view
Yep.
and then it's Redshift it like kind of freaks out even if it's just loading the icons
Yeah.
sometimes where there's like a lag and it's just long enough to like kill your motivation and workflow. And
Yeah.
with Blender though, it's like I've been downloading this one guy's projects. I think it's like BN19 or something like that. It's his like Twitter. But he was doing like really cool like stuff like it was an Iron Man suit and it had like the nanotech growth on and it was all
Oh,
in shader,
interesting.
ran in real time in Blender's viewport and it looked really good. I
Whoa.
was like, damn. That's like a whole area of effects that if we had a better viewport, it would just be easier to do. We still do that stuff, in
Yeah.
cinema, but it's just easier to do it in Blender to see what you're doing.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I don't know why Redshift isn't integrated as fully yet into cinema.
Yeah, I mean they
It's
bought
weird.
it, and then I thought that's what was gonna happen, and then they have that other real time thing that is supposed to happen and didn't happen yet. I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah, the
Well,
viewport updates that were cool
mhm,
work only if you use like all cinema stuff, and then yeah, the
mhm.
moment you start texturing it with like either Octane or Redshift, it's like I have
Yeah.
no clue what's happening because it
Nope.
only runs off what's in the diffuse channel,
Yeah.
and I
So
have
you'll get like
so you're just kind
black.
of blind to it. So there's
Mhm.
always like that breakup in previs too, where it's like you
Yes.
can get a great previs as
Yep.
long as you work inside of cinema, and then completely have to wait to switch over to like the fully rendered
So funny.
crappy previs. um
Yep.
which yeah, I'm always surprised sometimes how far you can push cinema's like viewport stuff with all the effects
Oh
turned
yeah.
on and like using
Yep.
purely cinema stuff, and like
Yeah.
it looks okay, and like the shadows are even there sometimes, but it sucks that like to go to the next step it's technically like two steps back, and
Yep.
then like you're now fully rendering it out at low quality every
Dude,
time.
tell me about it. I'm literally doing that right now. Like the last week has
Mm,
been doing camera moves and stuff like that with the viewport lighting and like getting like very, like the light sweeping across things. And you're
yeah.
like, this actually looks pretty good. And
Mm-hmm.
then, oh, it's all like I'm using standard lights.
Yep.
So it's not going to go into redshift. It will, but you wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, if there was just a little bit more connection between these two, I wouldn't have to build it twice. And you don't have
Right.
to build it twice in Blender.
Oh yeah, because
So
it just flips over.
yeah,
It's like real time preview, and then it's just like, do you want it to render more and be better?
yeah,
And you're like, yep.
there is a little bit of change
Mm,
between like EV and cycles, but it's not that big. And mostly based around the game engine stuff, like no GI,
yeah.
which changes the scene a lot, I guess, sometimes. But Cycles is getting really good too, but it's like hybrid, CPU, GPU, so it's not as
Mm,
fast. But I don't know. I think that it's so funny you say that just because it's so true. Like just going through it right now. I'm going to have to keep going through it next week. So
yeah.
um, yeah, man.
Cool. I don't think we have any um more questions from chat or anything. Do you have any, you're still working on the personal projects that you have going? Is there any more that you're like gonna start up, or do you kind of like seems like you close one and then you start the next one? You don't have like, or do you kind of multiple running at once?
I was working on this thing with this other designer, Ivan Santic, and I'm like animating one of his vehicles.
Hmm.
But I don't. I kind of. I've been doing a lot of fan art stuff,
Hmm.
and I like fan art because it's stuff I like.
Yeah.
And it has a built-in audience as well, so you know that
Mm-hmm.
people will watch it most likely. But maybe I'm leaning too heavily on the fan art. Probably should try to do my own stuff, but that's pretty hard to do as well because you could spend months just doing like figuring what it is, figuring out. I have some ideas for some stuff that's like sci-fi, but like kind of
Mm-hmm.
medieval, almost kind of like Destiny. If you ever played
Mm,
that, where
yeah,
the
yeah.
the style is
Capes
almost
and but still
yeah.
like robot helmet stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it seems it's so weird because there's like a zeitgeist where you think I'm thinking of doing something, and then I see someone else has already done it, and they just did it. They
Yeah.
just did it like last month, and you're like, wow,
Mm.
but I'm too slow. But
I mean,
it's
it's
tough.
gonna just get to a point where it's essentially everything, every combo has been like
Oh,
comboed at this point, and
yeah,
you're like, okay.
at
One
all
thing I
times.
do like about like I get a lot of like I have Halo art books and like
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars art books, is the like cutting room floor ideas are my favorite. That like they're normally like
Yeah.
concept artists who are like doing 20 helmets or like 20 different versions of like what Kylo Ren was gonna look like, and then they landed on one. But it's like
Mm-hmm.
there's so much there of like already in canon or like in a world things that like that's one of my favorite things that like I've wanting to jump into more is just like we saw it as like one drawing, and then like what if it was like you could see it in 3D? That's where I think there's like the excitement of like, yeah, everyone's seen the like Halo like fan edit, either be it in game or like rendered out and looking really cool.
Yeah.
But there's just so much there to like play in these worlds that it's more exciting. It kind of gets you over that like burnout phase, I think,
Oh
where
yeah.
you're like, I don't really care, like I'm
Mm-hmm.
the only one interested in this at
Yeah.
this moment. But like when you're playing with something you've like obviously have an attachment to, like Star Wars or Halo kind of things, you're like,
Hmm.
it's kind of fun that it's like these characters
Yeah.
that I've always seen, but I get
Hmm.
to like depict what's gonna happen, kind of thing.
Totally. I think it's definitely motivating to work on something that at least other people will enjoy as well. I think with if you're really good at your craft and whatnot, eventually like it doesn't matter what you make, people will like it. Like but the concept artists, I think that I get a lot of inspiration from concept
Mm-hmm.
artists because they're doing things that just kind of build the whole world. Like it's a big deal, I think, because it's kind of the visual language a lot of the times of the film. And I almost feel like a lot of the times you'll see at least the fully built out concepts, like not, there's so many crappy ones because we both done concept stuff before where it's just,
Mm-hmm.
nonsense. But the ones where they actually like render the landscape or whatever, they have lighting in there, like
Yeah.
what Jama Jurabev is doing, and it's like crazy. Like it looks more cinematic sometimes in the actual film. It's like I want to see
Yeah.
this film, not like whatever
And
this was. But
I'm always blown away by the ability of like the detail ratio of
yeah,
like how much non-detail can sell you on detail, where like a lot of times they'll see like this crazy mech and then like you zoom in, it's like
yeah,
just rectangles like
yeah,
kind of overlapping, and you're like, my brain filled in immediately that there's like so much
yeah,
intricacies going on, but then you look at it and you're like, they're just really good at like, this is enough visual information to sell you. Or like spaceship designs where you're like, oh yeah, there's all these pipes and it's just like little noodles
yeah,
in there, and you're
critters.
like, oh wow, I didn't even think of
Yeah,
that.
I feel
um
like that's the thing with film too. I think where we have higher frame rates. I think maybe like having film grain, having 24 FPS, having it lets your brain fill in
mm-hmm.
more. And then I think like with like the Hobbit films and with a 48 FPS,
The GoPro scene.
yeah, it's like the GoPro scene. Yeah, it's like that is like giving you too much information almost, where it's like
Yeah.
you're looking at a documentary or a news broadcast,
Or
and you're
soap
getting,
opera, I
yeah,
think.
soap
Yeah.
opera effect. You're seeing every little detail where I think muddy everything. I think the
Yeah.
best films like Dune and these other ones that Denis Villeneuve does, like just look so freaking good. And then if you look at Blade Runner 2049 or whatever it was, and Dune, like a lot of the stuff is covered in sand
Mm-hmm.
or fog or whatever, and it's just so atmospheric and it looks freaking amazing because he's not afraid, I guess, to cover it up. It would
Yep.
suck to be one of the artists
I
that
did
is.
see a breakdown where it's like how far they modeled out those scenes is just a travesty to like
Yeah,
immediately have only like the like next 10 feet essentially
mm,
rendered out, and then it's just like
yeah,
somebody composited like over. I mean, you have to have it there, like it's obviously no
yeah.
one really cares.
You could
um
change it or
yeah,
whatever.
if
I
you're
get
like
it.
a layout artist that's upset that your stuff's not being seen, that's probably not for you to
Yeah,
do environment layouts. But yeah, it's just
yeah.
silly.
Uh,
um
that's why I like Ian Hubert because he
if yeah,
can.
if it's far away, it's just
It's like
goofy.
okay,
It's
yeah,
just it's like a
yeah.
plane that's like
Doesn't matter.
displaced, that's moving around.
I
I
think
think he has a
yeah,
great perspective on
he does.
time management versus execution is like
Mm-hmm.
something that I feel like I wish I had a lot more of that, where it's
Oh,
like
me too.
he
Yeah.
seems to be really good at not getting in the weeds at
Mm-hmm.
any point in the process, where it's like, oh, it's far away,
Yep.
just slap something out there. It's like, oh
Texture.
no, I want to like go out, and it's like, nope, it's not. Like he's very based on where the camera is kind of
Yeah,
things.
it's
um
smart too, especially
yeah.
if you're a single creator. But if
Hmm.
you're, in production, I think there's like a disconnect maybe between what I think because a lot of people are learning more and more about visual effects and how that works with like Corridor and
Hmm.
Hubert and Blender in general. But when you're working on like a film or advertising or whatever, it's like you got to build out some stuff sometimes because what if the client
Yep.
changes it? And it's like when
Hmm.
you're
It's a big rework if you're at the very end. They're like, actually, can we have this go forward? And you're like, oh no, I didn't. That's real. That's not a real thing. You're like, oh, why? Why would you have done that? And it's like,
yeah,
oh, okay.
yeah.
Um,
I
but
know Ian Hubert does do like actual VFX stuff. Like he's worked on big movies and stuff,
hmm.
but I think they know what you're getting when you hire Ian Hubert, right?
Yep.
You're like he's gonna do this cool sci-fi stuff. It's gonna look good. So
Hmm.
maybe they don't uh, push it as much in like a giant studio or
Yeah.
something like that. But
Cool.
yeah,
Well, this was great. I hope everyone had a nice time. Thank you again, and then I guess everyone will see you again in a month when we do the art stream. So stick around or mark your calendars for that. I'll post something online to remind everybody. This will be up on YouTube in the coming weeks. So thank you everybody for stopping by. Thank you, Dave. Yeah, see you next
No
time.
problem. See you.